Well, they're gonna be problems. Those, it's like soccer.
Are they coming? Fantastic. Oh, good. Fantastic. I was running around didn't find anybody. I came in. Good.
I want to introduce you to one of
It's live.
Oh, it is. It
Live.
started.
Yeah.
Hi. They saw me doing it.
It's like
They know I was talking about so.
the first last year was.
Okay, to respect everyone's time, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Xian, Franzinger, Barrett. I'm an assistant 8th grade teacher from Chicago, Illinois. We deal with a massive bureaucracy in Chicago public schools that probably people from other places may not be entirely familiar. No, I think we deal with different elements of that in different places. My 8th grade colleague who's going to join us today actually got caught up on field trip missions. So I do want to apologize for that. We've got an incredible team here to present and to start a great conversation. We did want to go over a little bit. First of all, EduCon has some incredible norms, so we just wanted to revisit those very briefly. To respect and care about yourself, to respect and care about the community and its members, and to respect and care that this is a place of learning. And these are the same principles I believe that run in all school every day. We wanted to add one extra that in this conversation to show full awareness of, to the best of our ability, the inequities in voice and power, and step up and step back accordingly. So that means highlighting student voices. That means highlighting along all other intersections as well. Then, in addition to that, we did want to lay out a few things that we're kind of doing a starting point for this session. So these are issues that if we don't have consensus on, we can have additional conversations following the session about, but we don't want this to center on a debate around these issues. So some of the things we're accepting today for this conversation is that the current school system is designed inequitably. The way that policy lays out then exacerbates that inequity when we don't highlight student voices and student power. And that social justice work and organizing is the vital center of an education. It's not just an optional alternative style of teaching. We think of Yuri Kochiyama's words, the only reason to learn about anything is to create a more just society. And then lastly, and most importantly in this session, students have both the greatest stake in creating a just school system and the most directly useful experience and expertise on what needs to change. We're starting with those. Again, if those are points you would like to debate, we can do that following the session. But today we're going to center there. So what we are centering on then is how to cultivate students' voice and power both broadly and in our communities in a sustained way. With that note, I'd like to turn it over to Melinda Anderson, who's going. We've worked together a long time together in Educolor, dear friend and great leader in this situation.
Thank you, Xian.
Well, good morning. I'm Melinda Anderson. I am an education writer and a contributor for The Atlantic. And I just want to say this is an awesome opportunity because after spending, 12 years in public school seated with teachers in front, now I have my opportunity. This is a great topic. It's one that I've written on, and I think that when we think about right now all of the protests and different activism that's been going on with high school students around issues like school funding and mobilizing around school to prison and leading protests around racial climate in schools, it's easy to think that student activism is some kind of newfangled phenomenon, but actually it's not. And if we just go back a little bit in history, we can think about SNCC during the Civil Rights Movement. We can talk about the Freedom Riders. We can talk about voter registration drives in the South. We can talk about sit-ins to integrate lunch counters. And so that gives you some context about what we're going to talk about today. Because I think often we just think about things in the current frame, and we need to really kind of step back and really look at it from a more kind of panoramic view. And all of those civil rights actions were led by students. And so the connection between youth activism and race and social justice isn't new. And Black students and students of color have always been at the forefront of these protests, and they're battling the status quo both in the 1960s and today. So that's why when Xian and Rusul and I talked about this panel, we wanted student voices to be part of this because I think often as adults, and I know as a journalist, I have the opportunity to observe and interpret and analyze and put things through my own words, but I think it'd be a little lopsided for us to talk about student voice and not actually have some student voices in the room. So this morning we have Ameena and Alicia, and as a journalist, I like to say, I like primary sources, right? I like to go right to the source. And these are our primary sources today. And they're going to talk about some of the work that they've done around student organizing, how they've used student voice, for them, what student power means. And I really think this is a radical opportunity because, and it's so fitting for EduCom, right? Because so often too often we look at students, I think, as on the receiving end as opposed to leaders in their own right. And okay, I'm going to go on a little rant for a minute. A lot of times we talk about empowering students, and that's really a pet peeve of mine because, in fact, students are already empowered, okay? What we need to do as adults, as teachers, as parents, as community leaders is cultivate that and provide the opportunities in the classroom and in other settings for that to grow and nurture and foster. And so I'm actually going to sit down, okay? And I'm going to let these two students cede my time. Ameena? Yeah.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Ameena Atif. I'm an 11th grade student here at Science Leadership Academy. I would love to consider myself an activist because I really enjoy it. I am the president of the new club here at SLA called Girl Up, and it deals with girl and women empowerment, and I'm involved in Science Leadership Academy Student Union, which just does exactly what we're talking about here today. Woo! Okay, also good morning. My name is Alicia Jones. I'm also a junior here at Science Leadership Academy. I'm vice president of Girl Up and also a leader in student union here at Science Leadership Academy. I would consider myself a youth leader and also a student that is very focused on activism such as color. And I'm just here today. So basically, we wanted to start this conversation by really identifying how students can get involved in their communities and start activism and really not become detrimented by thinking teachers always have to be something. The students honestly think that they come to school for teachers to teach and for students to learn. But that shouldn't always be the case. Students should cultivate ideas and conversations, especially in classrooms, and really become a leader and see how the teacher teaches to eventually become a leader in their own aspects and their own.
just to riff off of that, thank you, ladies. You are so inspirational, and just seeing them standing up there in front of a crowd of students, parents, administrators, people who are a lot older than them can be a little bit intimidating for all of us, right? I came to the session this morning and I introduced myself and I said, ladies, are you nervous? They said, no, we're cool. And I said, no, but I am. And so just that is in itself is empowering for people to watch. So my name is Rusul, Alrubail. I'm from Toronto and I'm the Chief Education Officer at the Writing Project. I'm also an education blogger. A lot of you probably, some of you right there, have read my blogs on Student Voice, and I'm a huge Student Voice advocate. This didn't really happen right away for me as a student. I came to Canada when I was in grade 5, and I spoke no English whatsoever. And so as an English language learner, at that time, I had no voice, literally. And figuratively, even in my own language, I couldn't express to people how I felt just because there's that lack of student cultivation of voice in school. So I learned to kind of, after learning my language, learning English, I kind of, up until university, I feel like that's when I kind of was empowered to speak up for my beliefs, my thoughts and ideas. And so I always reflect back on what happened between that stage of high school and transition to university. And I think a lot had to do with getting out of the classroom, where there's that one kind of, one group, one teacher, all of that, and now you're kind of an individual as opposed to being looked at as a collective group. So that's when I was empowered to speak up and, start being, I joined the MSc International. That was my way of kind of doing my own advocacy. And then after graduating, I just started, let's empower students that do not have the language to advocate for themselves, because to me, it's always disheartening to see that this person, they have thoughts, they have ideas, they just don't know how to express it. And that's, it's really, really heartbreaking for me to watch as a teacher, as a parent, as a student myself when I was back amongst them. So to that, I guess it's important to kind of right now we want to join forces together in groups and discuss about ways where we could foster that environment to make it comfortable for students to express themselves. I think for me that's the number one thing, is that we have to make it a safe place for them to be who they are and share their thoughts and ideas and have a voice, or be empowered to have that voice. So should we do the breakout session right now?
Yeah, I can share. I'm gonna read one piece from a student who couldn't make it here, and then we'll lay out the guidelines for the groups. So I did want to share a piece from Jennifer that she wrote for The Nation that talks kind of about our organizing out of Brighton Park and Little Village in Chicago. And this one centers around the idea of opting out, which is a very nuanced and controversial issue, and I think she captures some of the nuances in this piece. So she says, this spring, talking about the past spring in 2015, students at Brighton Park Elementary in Chicago joined peers from across the country in organizing a mass refusal of the park standardized test. We selected one student in each class as a leader who made sure everyone knew their rights and passed out opt-out forms to anyone who wanted one. Before the park, we assembled within our school to turn in all the forms. While the school initially dismissed our efforts, we ultimately got the administration to show us respect. This was very well organized, is what they said when we turned in the form. When it came time to take the test, 97% of 8th graders and 86% of 7th graders opted out,
Mm.
leading to normal classes the following week instead of a second week of testing.
Mm.
While there are many reasons to refuse the test, we are largely Latino school rejected as racist. It's given only in English and doesn't respect our multilingualism. And while the media acts like only whites are opting out, we are showing otherwise. And so I think she captures a lot of elements to effective student organizing, which is they selected their own leadership structure. They made their own decisions about what to take action on. They respected their peers' rights that they had a choice to get involved, right? They had a theory that this was racist, it didn't respect multilingualism, but also people had the option of taking forms. They were educated about their rights, right? And then, lastly, I really want to highlight how she sees her identity and her community identity in the context of a movement in a critical way, right? Like, you can even detect her showing some critique at some of the mainstream sort of more stereotypically white elements of the opt-out movement, right? And so, this highlights a lot of what we, and when I say we, I don't mean we as adult allies or adult activists, but we as a community in Brighton Park try to highlight in this movement to ensure that student leadership doesn't mean students taking responsibilities in an adult-defined movement, but actually students taking leadership in defining and directing the movement as a whole from their perspective. So at this stage, we wanted to, with that focus on not only discussing this in theory, but how do we engage in it in our own communities, break out, and we will head to separate groups to discuss this more thoroughly. We did want to give about 10 minutes to discuss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How
About
long do we have right now?
we've got about so we've got about 75. So we're definitely going to highlight that, on the ground, how do we implement in our own communities. At this stage, we did want to do the large group conversation as well as, soon moving into the smaller group conversation. So are there questions, ideas, shareback that people want to do on this challenge of supporting and cultivating long-term student activism that you wanted to share out?
I could share a little bit what I've been doing in my class so that maybe other people will be encouraged. Jose, you're next.
Okay, cool. Ask ladies first.
I'm currently not teaching. Yes, sorry, I totally blanked out. So last year with my students, when we say student activism, student voice, sometimes I see a lot of teachers kind of get a little bit intimidated because they're like, well, how do I get my students to start protesting? For me as a teacher, that wasn't really about that. I have a lot of English language learners in my class, and I was a professor at a college, so I teach adults mostly. First year college students, second year college students. So a lot of them are from, they're international students. They don't have the language capabilities to, like I said, express yourself orally or written. And so we started to do reflections back a couple of years ago when I started being when I was a teacher. We didn't have, I wasn't introduced to blogging back then. And so our reflections were basically paper and pen responses. Let's write what we think about this topic. Let's write so I'd bring a newspaper article about a current event that happened. This happened, guys, so we'd go through it, look at the vocabulary first, make sure that students understand what we're discussing, because a lot of the times that with English language learners, they start with the language. Do we understand what we're talking about? And a lot of the language, a lot of articles contain sarcasm, irony, and this is a lot really hard for students to decipher. And so we have to help them do that. So with the reflection pieces, that kind of empowered them because they are able to give their thoughts and ideas, and at the same time with my feedback, they're able to see whether first the comprehension is on the right track in terms of the content, but also that they have their own opinions, and that piece of paper, this is what you think. You have an opinion, and it's important. So I see it in their eyes right away. When that piece of paper means something to me, instantly it means something to them. So imagine what it meant like when they started blogging publicly to the whole world, and it's, Miss, I got 70 views on my blog. Oh my God, it's astonishing. It's amazing that people actually. I got one comment from my student. He said, "People actually are interested in my writing," and that meant the world to me. Jose.
I was just gonna say something that Xian has reminded us time and time again, which is a lot of us suffer from a severe case of adultism. I guess what I interpret it as, and of course he can expound this, I often find that when we get in these spaces and we always have like this hierarchy of who needs to be talking about what in education. That means parents, students often get the second row versus we get the front row for whatever reason. And it's not just for whatever reason, it's also because we have this thing where we're trying to empower ourselves as educators, but I often find that when we do that, we do it with to the detriment of others who have probably a bigger voice than we give them, or that we allow for, that we cultivate for. And then secondly, I think we also need to think about the ways in which trying to reform ourselves and reflect is often a very hard thing to do. And it's not just difficult, but in many schools, it can also be, it can cost your job. It can cost your livelihood. And the way we think about focusing on students often is against a lot of our administrators' wishes, including my own, to be frank. And so when we're talking in our tables, I think a lot of us may be overt in the ways that we do things. I mean, a space like SLA, for example, seems to cultivate a lot of these student voices. But a space like mine, for example, I have to be subversive, and that's the only way that I'm going to be able to get my students to talk. So I find myself being like, oh, I don't know what I did. I didn't do anything. The students, however, they came up with their own voice, and I just got out the way. I think that's a really powerful narrative to have within ourselves as we talk within our tables.
Oh, so I had a question for you, Alicia. So if you are getting your voice out, right? And what if you feel only comfortable telling certain adults or certain teachers in your space, in your school, about things that you care about? Like, how do you, as a teacher, I have certain students who, they don't feel as comfortable maybe going beyond, like, that safe space that you create. So how, as a teacher, do you have any advice on how to cultivate my students to reach a larger audience?
I would say don't push it. Like, for example, our English, our 9th grade and 10th grade English
perspectives you want that had?
I was gonna say respect as well, but to elaborate on that, I think respect from the door. Like, when he was sharing his students' work, it's sad that oftentimes students always have to prove something to get respect. Like, why can't we just automatically, from the get-go, just get respect? As soon as I start talking to an adult, they respect me, I respect them. Freedom. I think SLA has given us a lot of freedom to not only do what we want to do, but say what we want to say. Some students in other schools feel like, oh, maybe if I say this, I'll get in trouble, or maybe if I don't say this, I'll get in trouble.
Can you just in one way, a little elaborate to identify? Because I'm trying to understand how to develop that in a school, right? So an exact example, like how do they give you freedom? Because that's, for some people, that's very scary in a classroom to just let everything free fall. You know, it might consider chaos. But what does that freedom look like? Like, how do you define the freedom?
I mean, like, we still have structure, meaning, like, everybody can't just be running around the room or, like, just be talking at once. I mean, that's what you do at home. But a freedom in a sense, like, when we feel like, oh, there's an issue at SLA, like, I feel like we didn't have any girl or women empowerment clubs. So I went to my history teacher and I said, I want to start a club. She said, okay, let's do it. Like, that as an example of freedom, just knowing that you have the freedom to start something in this community. It's not just like, oh, these are the strict things that we have at school, or these are the extracurriculars that we have at school. You're able to develop something on your own. So even those little small amounts of freedom, not just letting kids just run wild, but being able to start something on their own.
Can I add something to that? I did an interview recently that was on social justice teaching, and one of the sources said, because I was asking her about social justice teaching, and she said teaching is an act of social justice, right? And I can't paraphrase everything she said, she was so much better at it, but I think the point is that in a classroom or in a school, if you're developing critical thinkers, then these kind of issues and developing, and you asked about how to get them engaged in social justice, that should be part of the classroom philosophy, right? And what you're teaching when you're teaching about history, social studies, whatever you're teaching. I remember there was a session last year here about social justice in math. You know, I've been asked about social justice in science. It's all there, but it's the thinking, the mindset that you bring as a teacher to how you instruct on those subjects. And I'm not an educator, right? So I always have to put that out there. But I think even as a parent, my son, who's in high school, he had an English teacher last year who completely, and I think to some extent, kind of went against the grain and had them reading, you know, To Kill a Mockingbird and all of these, and this really went into the March on Washington and what that really was about. And it wasn't just I Have a Dream, right? And it was about jobs and all that. And he discovered that, in fact, his birthday was on, you know, the same day as March on Washington. There was a level of consciousness that was raised for him, and that in turn has him now thinking differently about the things that are going on in present time around movements and how they connect. So I mean, that's just a small example of how I think making those connections for students are just really critical. And then that starts to, it plants a seed and it starts to grow in them. That at least has been my experience.
Hi. So you said that you feel like you have freedom and respect to like express your ideas, and then when you saw a need for a club, go and kind of like start it. But my question is, how do you get from the idea to the do, right? The freedom to do and then the actual doing. Because I feel like our students have that freedom and it's like it's out there, but it's like something that it's like, that's a great idea, let's do it. And then it's like, oh, okay. And they're just looking at you to do it. Like, you do this because I brought it to you. How do I work with them to get past expecting it to be done and being a part of the process?
Well, I think that sometimes giving an idea, the kid is either going to take it, they're going to run with it, they're going to add their own ideas to it, or they're going to leave it, or they're going to pick it up later and then maybe see that now it fits into their criteria, what they want to do and how they're building it. So maybe just putting an idea out there and then having belief in that student, telling the student, well, you can do it. Or if you see them like slacking and not really trying to build what they were talking about and saying like, hey, are you still starting this club or are you still starting this movement? Like, why is it on pause? Why don't you feel like you can do this? Do you have belief in yourself? Do you have hope for this? Like, is this a dream or something that you want? Like, encourage the student, because encouragement can go a mile. Because if that student might not feel like they can build this club, they might have that freedom, but if they don't believe in themselves that they can take this club somewhere, then they're just going to drop it and continue working on only academics. So that shouldn't just be the foremost of what they want.
Okay, but beyond encouragement, like actual steps, like you had this idea for a club, you went to your teacher, and then?
Two things. One, I think it's just natural born determination. Some kids just have that confidence in themselves. Second thing, as far as actual steps, I think is talking a lot with the parents, because confidence starts at home. Like I know with my mom, her mom, they've just instilled in us from when we were little, like, you have to believe in yourself. You're beautiful. You're this, you're that, you're that. So when I personally went to my teacher and I was like, look, I have the first meeting laid out. I know who I want in it. Like, I have step A, B, C, D, E, all the way to F. So I think communicating with the parents and what the parents are doing is a very big issue, because you can do the encouragement in the classroom and say, you can do it, I believe in you. But then if the mom is telling the child, like, no, you're not going to go anywhere in life, you can't do it, then it's just not, it's not helping what you just did in the classroom. So talking to the parents is a really big thing about why their child is not stepping up in class. Yeah.
And just sort of add on that too, I guess like the motto that we have here is learn freely. So the expectation that you can learn something, you want to create something. And that's where the projects come in, and then what next? What are you going to do after the project's done? You know, this isn't just standing there. Like, what are you going to do next? How are you going to be a leader in your community? And then that's talked about from day one, as they talked about, you know, from the beginning. So, you know, how do we get students to take hold of their community? You know, how do we encourage them to constantly want to do things differently? And they just feed on it. They're just like awesome. So they can create clubs because they know they have the knowledge, and they also know that they have the support behind them to actually create something.
Why don't we go ahead and move into groups? This is a very good discussion. We will have an opportunity at the end to kind of, after we've done our small group work, to come back. We won't do the classic share back where people read exactly what happened, right? But we'll think of a few good dynamics or challenging dynamics that happen in your group that you can bring back and we can close out. Why don't we do, I'm just looking, we're looking at 4 groups. Rather than count off, which would get everyone have to move everywhere, we can probably do maybe if folks in this area kind of move together, that'd be one group. If we get kind of the folks in the back of the room to move with this table here, that'd be another group. That's 2. And then maybe 3 here and 4 folks here and here. Seems reasonable? Yep. All right. No, I think it's a good idea. So, either one
You guys smart.
I didn't believe in any of the work that I was doing because it wasn't for the rest of the world, right? Mandate, and I sent it to the chair of the department.
Respecting each other.
If anyone wants to share something brilliant from their group that must be shared with the whole room, we would absolutely love that.
We just heard a beautiful story about third graders engaging in some community activism around their park. And it was just a very concrete example of what can be done. I found that very inspiring.
And it comes out of listening to kids. If you do nothing else, you listen to kids, they will start.
You want to take it around?
And also just learning how to check ourselves and know what we bring to the table. How that's going to affect the students, whether we know it or not. Because they can smell, and I'm sure you guys know, you know when it's not real.
Nose.
You got one here? A lot of unlearning in order to be able to learn.
Yeah, we heard that term over here too, unlearning.
Anyone else want to? We want to, we'll have the students close out with your questions and then we can head off to do this great work together.
Well, my reflection from the conversations that I took part in were that teachers are teachers, but students are also teachers in a sense. And teachers should also start to become students in a way of listening to your students and engaging in conversations, trusting them is like a major thing. And understanding that rules might be there, but rules and guidelines are two major different things. And instilling that trust in your students will lead to a lot more conversation, a lot more discussions, a lot more shy or more quieter students to outreach, to start smaller discussions, to start larger discussions, or maybe just talking to you and for you to listen.
One thing that I'm taking away is that fighting an institution is hard. It is very, 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 very hard, especially an old institution where so many people think this way. It is really hard to change people's mindsets and what they think and what they think is right or what they think is wrong. But you can't be afraid to fight against an institution because, like you said, the students can tell when it's not real and students can sense fear. And when they look to the teacher as the support and they see that the teacher is afraid, then they become afraid. So I'm taking away, don't be afraid to do the work that you have to do.
Great.
Thanks to all of you for participating. We'll look forward to great conversations next 2 days and beyond.
Thank you. And great work to come.
Thanks,
You can get any go viral, but I know what's going